Hello, thank you for joining us today. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes just to let folks trickle in. Looks like we might have everyone actually. Oh, great. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today for SustainSC's Technical Assistance webinar on circular water practices. My name is Megan Dix. I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at SustainSC. Today, we will be talking about circular water practices with Rebecca West from REWA. I just wanted to quickly introduce the chat. Today we will be using the chat to take your questions and any comments that you want, but we have also disabled the video and audio for attendees today to streamline and make sure that you have the best presentation experience possible. So we do want to hear where you're from, where you're located, who you work for. So feel free to introduce yourself to the chat now with your name, company, location, so we can get to know a little bit more about who's in the audience. We will also be giving you a quick overview of SustainSC and then jumping into our presentation with Rebecca. Afterwards, we'll take some questions and we'll wrap up and talk next steps. Just a quick introduction to our team. As I said, I'm Megan Dix. I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator. With me today are Emily Skaggs, our Director of Sustainability, and Brent Kosick, our Director of Partnerships. Not with us today are our CEO, Leslie Scarden, and our Senior Vice President of Conservation, Kristen Austin Gunter, who are attending a conservation symposium in Charleston today. And with that, Brent will go ahead and give you a little bit more information about SustainSC.
Thanks so much, Megan. So first, the reason why we exist or our purpose is to build and grow a more sustainable future for South Carolina at the intersection of commerce and conservation. So all the programming that we put forward kind of looks through this lens to make sure what is both good for the growth, the financial growth of South Carolina, but also making sure that we're doing that in a sustainable way for our environmental resources. So that gets us to our mission, or what gets us up every day. So our mission is to connect the sustainability goals of business in South Carolina with local solutions for the benefit of our economy, our environment, and our people. These are the values that our members operate by and what we'll be also operating by during today's webinar. So we want to make sure that we have a productive and respectful conversation. So as you all engage in questions and discussion in the chat, please abide by these values that we all share. We know what we might have different opinions, but we all have strong views to share and make sure that we're all kind of working towards those same goals for our state. Also briefly, just wanted to share our strategic framework, or the 4 pillars that really guide our work. First up, we have expanding our economy, and this really centers around our partnership with the Department of Commerce to make sure that we are helping to attract and grow businesses in the state that have a sustainability mindset and are also going to align with those values that I previously shared. Next up is growth and retention. This is really the bread and butter of our work with our membership. This is how we support our broad stakeholder groups that include municipalities, industry, small business, nonprofits, higher education across the state, to bring them all together in programming like we're about to share today. Next up, we have our municipal support and land use planning. We were actually participating in a great pilot with the town of Greenwood, South Carolina, where we are looking at how do we make communities more resilient in South Carolina? What stakeholders can we bring together? What are the risks and opportunities that we see? And then how can we gain traction in just funding some of the key action items that come out of this work? We're looking to hopefully grow that as the years continue. Finally, we have outreach and education. So this is all around making sure that decision makers at the public and private level know how constituents are feeling about these same topics that are important to our membership, as far as investment in energy, circular economy resources, workforce, and making sure that we are gathering that information and sharing. It also kind of plays into the webinar today. This is where we kind of share things with the public to show all the great things that are happening here in South Carolina and also the opportunities we have in front of us. So within one of our main pillars of our programming is our circular economy work, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today during today's webinar. So what makes up this work is that SustainSC works with our members and partners to reduce waste by creating business solutions, including understanding the economics of the end product demand and recycling. And so we're really excited about today's topic, which is what we think is really innovative practices taking place in the state all around circular water practices and the economies related to that. So with that, we'll go ahead and introduce our speaker. We're really excited to have Rebecca West, CEO of REWA, with us. And I know our team has been looking forward to this webinar and presentation. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to you, Rebecca.
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be able to talk about my favorite topic today, which is water. But what I'd like to do is just share with you some circular water practices, or what we see as circular practices within the water sector through the lens of some projects and things that Renewable Water Resources has done. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So I want to start this morning by just talking about the beauty of the circularity of water. I'm going to take you back to probably your elementary school training where you saw the water cycle. How many people remember studying the water cycle? And as we could see, you know, water is just naturally circular in itself. Yeah, hands up. That's right. We remember that. And so I want to put that in your mind a little bit today as we talk about, you know, the thing about the circularity of resources that we have. Well, water is just naturally circular in the water cycle that we have, just from evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, and how that works. And as we think about water in a different sense, beyond this circularity, you know, we see that water is also seasonal. We see there are wet seasons and there are dry seasons, and there's also just the tides of coming and going. So, you know, this is just a natural course of conversation of circularity. But I want to share today about how we can continue to support that circularity in water. So if we can move to the next slide, please. I would like for us also to think about that everything, especially when we think about water, is in a circular cycle. And we also realize that nature wastes nothing. If we think about just how the water cycle works, it's just taking and replenishing and restoring. And how can we, as people that manage water processes, and specifically on wastewater processes, how can we take every waste or every byproduct that comes from replenishing that water and find something positive into it? And do that with a mindset of responsibility should always turn into renewal. And I'm very happy that Renewable Water Resources within our mission and our vision is that we really focus on improving our community's quality of life by transforming wastewater into a renewable resource through responsible and innovative practices. So we've truly embraced our responsibility of trying to find every resource that we have responsibility for, whether it's the water that comes to our treatment facilities, the facilities themselves, and then our responsibility back to our community as a water sector leader. So I want to share a little bit about that. And then just as a reminder, the future is just another term. So as we think about how do we start changing and focusing on circular practices, we just look for yet another opportunity to turn and reuse what's already been given to us. So next slide, please. So a little bit about REWA. So Renewable Water Resources is a wastewater-only utility that's located in the upstate of South Carolina. So in our next slide, we see just the area. Here we go. We serve approximately 166,000 customers, which translates to a little over 500,000 people. Our service area includes 5 counties in the upstate, and we have 9 water resource recovery facilities that take the wastewater from our community and turn that into clean water, but also other renewable resources. And in our next slide, you'll see just the service area that we provide service to. Our major county that we provide service to is in Greenville, but we also support portions of Spartanburg and Lawrence and Anderson and Pickens County, and we provide wastewater services to this area. Now, the one thing that I'd like to share that makes the opportunity of renewing every part of that water that's never wasted, but the water that comes to us for treatment into a new opportunity is the fact that we are located in the upstate of South Carolina and often at the headwaters, are close to the headwaters of many of the streams and then rivers that flow through South Carolina. So the requirements that we have for cleaning water is a little more stringent because we have to remove the additional phosphorus and the additional nitrogen from the wastewater that we collect. Now that's an opportunity for us, and REWA has often looked at those opportunities of how we can pull the best resources out of that water as we clean it. So I wanted to share that in that it's an important factor for us to think not only how we can recover resources that come naturally in wastewater, but how can we also ensure that the water that we're returning to the rivers and streams continues to support what is needed downstream. So in our next slide, we see the example of one of our treatment facilities. And as you can see here, we have treatment facilities that are designed to biologically remove phosphorus and nitrogen from a majority of our wastewater streams. Not all of our WRFs, our water resource recovery facilities, not wastewater treatment facilities, but water resource recovery, looks for finding all those resources that come from the water that we have, but also the biological treatment process itself. How can we recover energy? How can we take the gas that's produced when we digest the solids from our treatment process and use that again and recycle that through our treatment process? So I'm going to speak a little bit about that today as well. So in our next slide, we have something I want to share as we return water to the different basins in the upstate. We actually return water to 4 basins in the upstate of South Carolina: the Inouye Basin, the Tiger Basin, the Reedy Basin, and the Saluda Basin. So those 4 basins, as we'll see shortly, flow into other basins throughout South Carolina. But one of the responsibilities we have, especially as we are returning 44 million gallons of water back to our rivers and streams today. Again, if you think about the circularity of that, you know, in the upstate of South Carolina, our drinking water supply comes from surface water. So we remove those waters from our rivers and streams. In our case, predominantly Greenville Water provides those water supplies to most of our customers. And in the Tiger Basin, that's provided by Spartanburg Water. And in Anderson, we have water provided from our friends in Anderson County. And so those water supplies are withdrawn from the rivers and streams in the upstate. So as we clean water and return it back into those rivers, there's that circularity of taking water out and putting back in. Now, do we have the perfect balance of taking water out of each basin and returning it to each basin? We're not there yet, but it's something that we need to think about as we move forward in the future. I have this picture of the Reedy River because it is our urban river throughout Greenville County. And one fact I'd like to share that REWA does in providing water back to the Reedy River is during the summertime, and especially as we are now living through a bit of a drought right now in South Carolina, our flows returning back into the Reedy River, our clean water that is returned, can constitute up to 80 to 90% of the river and portions of the Reedy River during these times of year. So it's important for us when we think about water circularity and water reuse, how much water do I need to return back naturally to the rivers and streams to maintain the flora ecosystem, and how much can be used perhaps in a different way to support industry or golf courses or other uses. So these are some things in the water circularity question that we have that we need to think about as we're managing our water resources. In our next slide, you'll see an example of things that we've been talking about for many years in South Carolina, and which I'm so excited about that we're finally seeing developed, is our state water plan. And as you've probably heard, we have been spending probably, I think it's at least the last 10 to 15 years, focusing on how can we develop a robust plan for South Carolina to determine those water quantities that need to be managed. And in the next slide, I don't know if you've ever looked closely at our state water plan, but they've broken this plan out into different basins. Now, this slide is a bit of an eye chart. I know I can't read it, but I wanted to share with you the complexity of how we need to think about water circularity, how we need to think about how we withdraw water out of a portion of a water supply, and then how it gets returned back to that water supply. Or does it get sent to maybe another basin? Or does it get consumed and it never returns to the water supply? So the beauty of the state water plan and the challenge of the state water plan is we're finally developing that roadmap of how water is withdrawn from our water supplies in South Carolina, whether it's surface water or groundwater, and how is it returned and recycled. And I think this is going to be a very important tool for us as we move forward in dealing with the growth and just changes that we see happening in South Carolina. I'm excited too that we're going to start talking about water quality, because I know we've done a good job of trying to understand the water quantity challenges that we have, but our next iteration of the state water plan is going to look at water quality, which I think affords an opportunity of pulling perhaps the resources that make up water quality. Like, for example, for us, it's the wastewater components that have nutrients in it. How can we take those nutrients out and recycle that? The same with stormwater in the future. How do we continue to clean our stormwater so that those waters that get returned, those nutrients, can be removed and beneficially reused? So I know for REWA, as we ponder what we're going to do with the 44 million gallons of water that we clean every day, where it gets put back into our surface water supplies to be used, again, further downstream, is a very important question. In our next slide, we'll see again, I'm going to move to the treatment process a bit. I mentioned we take our water, we clean our water every day, and we return that back to the rivers and streams in the upstate. We then also have our biological component of the wastewater treatment process. How we take nature, we go out and we take Mother Nature, bacteria and biology that occurs in the rivers and streams. Here's another circular component of that. We take that biology, we put it into a treatment process, kind of condense that, kind of force Mother Nature to do their thing in the treatment process and clean the water. And then the leftover biology, the biology that we use to clean the water, we remove that from the treatment process. And as we remove that from the treatment process, we realize it is full of valuable nutrients. It's got organic matter, it's got nitrogen, it's got phosphorus, which could be used again. So one way that you could take and reuse and recycle that is you can actually take some of those components directly out as you separate the water from the used biology, as I'd like to say. And then our next slide is an example of how REWA, since 1989, have been doing this by the production of biosolids. So even back early when biosolids reuse was just getting started in South Carolina, REWA decided this is something we should do, not only to recover those nutrients and to take that organic matter, but how can we take that and beneficially reuse that in the upstate? And so today, as that program has grown from 1989, we recycle 48 million gallons of biosolids each year, which is full of nitrogen and phosphorus and has a fertilizer value of close to $1 million a year. Now, these biosolids are shared with our private farm owners. They allow us to come and place biosolids on their fields, and that's about 11,000 acres of farm field that we have in the upstate. That has allowed them to continue in their farming practices. It has allowed REWA the opportunity to recover and to use the biology, again, not just from after it does its job of cleaning water, now it gets to be, as it's passed on, it's finished its functional life, it becomes biosolids, so that now we can help farmers grow a crop. And I like to say we try to keep the green in the upstate by doing this. And in our next slide, going back to the circularity opportunity, so taking that biology, transforming it into biosolids, which provides a fertilizer value, allows for multi-generational farms to hold on to those farms. We then have the requirement of removing the crop that is grown on the farms where the biosolids been placed. Now, why is that? Well, this goes back to the circularity opportunity. We put nitrogen, we put phosphorus down, we put organic matter on to build up the topsoil of these farm fields. But now we have to make sure that the crop is removed, because as those crops grow, they utilize the nitrogen and phosphorus. And this removal of the crop from the field allows the nitrogen to be removed and ensures that it doesn't stay on the farm field and then affect groundwater quality. So here's another further dimension of that circularity, removing that crop that's grown, taking that crop, letting it be recycled and reused in agriculture so that it becomes food and then eventually becomes a product again that's recycled. So here's a great example of how wastewater utilities and other utilities across the country and across the world have used the treatment process and captured all the good out of it and then returned it back to the environment. In the next slide, I'd like to put a different perspective on circularity. As we know, we see growth occurring across our state, and as one of the foundational values for Sustain SC is how can we balance that growth with conservation, and how can we ensure that we're protecting as much as the green space, the riparian space, the water space in South Carolina, so that we could support the growing economies and growing communities. So this is a project that REWA had, and I'd like to share this, that you got to think differently how not only do you clean the water, but how do you then support the infrastructure needed to clean and transport water in the future. And so with this project, we actually, we put a tunnel underneath Greenville, the city of Greenville, back in 2019. And this tunnel affords opportunities for future growth and for expanding the opportunity for collecting wastewater and transporting it to our Malden Road facility. This tunnel was 100 feet down in the ground. It was a little over a mile long, ran across underground the city of Greenville. And in the upstate of South Carolina, we're blessed with a lot of rock. So I could say that as we built this tunnel, unlike the tunnel, like say, for example, Charleston Water has, that's in the mud, we are fortunate that our tunnel was in granite. And so in our next slide, you'll see one of the things we did after we thought about, gosh, we're going to remove a lot of granite to build our wastewater infrastructure. What are we going to do with that granite? So we told the contractor to, as this granite is removed from the tunnel, to bring it over to our main campus for REWA that is located at the Malden Road facility, the treatment facility that we have. And so we took all of the granite from that tunnel and we stored it on site, and we are now using that granite to help us lay future infrastructure for our conveyance processes. So when we have to put in a new sewer line, or if we have to repair a sewer line, we've got to make sure it's properly bedded. We are reusing the granite that came out to create the tunnel for our infrastructure. We're also using this material, and you'll see in the next slide, to help us as we do stream bank restoration. Now, not only are we using the granite that came from the construction that REWA had to put the infrastructure in place, we realize that we need other sources of rock as we want to reaffirm and restore our stream banks that are supporting our wastewater infrastructure along rivers and streams. Because if you don't know it, we use a lot of gravity when it comes to wastewater. We do pump some water, but we want to try to use gravity as much as possible. Again, thinking about how much energy we're using to move wastewater from point A to point B. Well, as you look at using gravity, oftentimes our sewer lines follow the course of a river. And so as we have seen impacts from climate and from storm and growth with extra water often coming into these rivers and streams, we realize we've got to stabilize those shorelines a little better to ensure our infrastructure is protected. Now, how do we do that? We do that with some of the rock that we had from our tunnel project, but we also scavenge the area that we see in our community as new neighborhoods are growing. And as I said, we're blessed in the upstate with a lot of rock. And oftentimes those contractors are removing rock so they could build a new strip shopping center, or they could build a new subdivision or a new industry, and they need to get rid of that rock. So our team at REWA goes and we'll find where there's rock that's coming from a construction site. And if they don't want to have to haul that rock off or pay to have that rock removed, we then collect it and take it and store it so that we can use it again to help support our infrastructure in the future. This saves money, but it also allows us to recycle and not take that rock and wherever it's going to get disposed. Oftentimes they'll go to a construction and debris landfill. We were like, wow, that will help us. It's something we're constantly going to get to use. And it's a new way of thinking about how we're using that waste material as new growth happens to help support our water infrastructure along the upstate. Similarly, our crews that work on our right-of-ways, that clean our right-of-ways to ensure that we have access to our conveyance infrastructure, the pipes and all that collect the wastewater and take it to our treatment facilities. Oftentimes we may have to remove trees, or we may have to remove trees in our construction. We take those trees and we grind those trees up, and we use that mulch to help us not only with our maintenance of our right-of-ways, but also when we bring it back to our resource recovery facilities that we have here at Malden Road. We use it to help strain any material we may remove, grease and trash that comes out of the collection line. We use a big vacuum cleaner, or a vacuum truck, basically, that goes and removes that material from a sewer line and brings it to a concrete slab that we have so it can dry out, and then we can dispose of that material. We use this mulch to help us do that as well. So again, using all those resources that are a part of the business of cleaning water. So in our next slide, I'd like to take it to another level in terms of circularity, is using the sun. You know, again, looking at all the natural resources that we're given, we realize that long-term, REWA wants to get to be energy neutral, and we have a goal of being energy neutral in 10 years. Well, that's a rather aggressive goal. And so what we're trying to do is look for ways to capture resources like the sun and utilize solar to support our treatment processes. And then likewise, how do we take the methane gas that is a byproduct of the generation of our biosolids, use that for heating our digesters, and how we can use that for producing energy one day. The other thing we were thinking about is, well, now we've got all these solar farms, and we have solar farms located at 4 of our water resource recovery facilities. It's kind of hard to cut the grass, as you can see, under some of these solar panels. So we have employed our most favorite team members, which is our sheep. And so we decided we would use passive lawnmowers, and we have sheep that are located at our water resource recovery facility that will cut the grass for us. And I will tell you, they are tremendous emotional support team members too. They are some of our most favorite team members, but also colleagues. We enjoy spending time with our sheep. Now, the one thing I will share, we have a unique blend of sheep because we wanted to make sure that we can have sheep that can tolerate the heat that we have in South Carolina. So you can see this sheep looks a little mangy, you know, the one that's kind of on the right-hand side. Well, that's by design. We don't have to shear the sheep. As it starts to get warmer, they'll shed their coats. But these sheep have also been bred so that they will not eat the grass down to the roots, that they'll just simply cut the grass for us. So this is yet another way, as we're cleaning water, as we're ensuring that we're supporting the need for water and the cleaning of water. How can we use those resources in a circular fashion to support that? Our next slide that we have kind of falls in the vein of how do we continue to look at resources in our community, not just unique to what comes into our treatment facilities, our resource recovery facilities, or what we have is in terms of just on our campuses. But we realize, sticking to our mission of enhancing our community's quality of life, that we like to eat a lot of oysters here in the upstate. Now, as you know, oysters aren't germane to the upstate. They come from the coast. And so several years ago, we embarked on a program that would collect oyster shells from our local restaurants and from just people in our community that have oyster roast, and bring our oyster shells to have an opportunity to bring them to our Malden Road campus, where we take these oyster shells and we bag them up and then take them to the coast to restore the oyster beds that are along the coastal areas of South Carolina. So here you see an example of our team members, and we also have other team members from other utilities, like, for example, Spartanburg Water and Greenville Water. They come over and they'll help us bag our oysters, as well as other people in our community. And it's just a great chance for us to spend time together as a team effort, but it also allows us to share the story that, you know, we may use these oyster shells in the upstate of South Carolina. Now, I guarantee you, before we started collecting them, they'd all end up in a landfill somewhere. But today, and as we go to the next slide, we could see that these oyster shells have been bagged and taken to the coast, where they're able to not only protect the coastal shoreline to help from erosion, but also restore the natural habitat, but also eventually that more oyster beds can grow. So I don't know if many of you know this little piece of trivia, but one oyster shell, the one oyster every day cleans a little over 50 gallons of water. So if you think about that, we're taking this waste material that would end up in a landfill, we're bagging it, we're taking it back to the coast, we're restoring the oyster reefs, and I also believe we're improving water quality from the mountains to the sea. So not only does our water flow from our facilities, our recovery facilities in the upstate, eventually going to the coast, here's another way that we can help improve water quality on our coastal areas. So we're very proud about this. We've had, I think there's been four events now where we've gone to the coast and restored the oyster beds. And we're really proud because this one is called the Rewa Reef. So we've actually got one that's named after us. So that was pretty neat. In our next slide, we'll see another way, again, how we think about how we are to do our part for the environment, but also use all those resources that we've been given. As I mentioned, we have to remove several trees along our right-of-ways, and we also have wood that we have there just would be a waste wood at our facilities. Well, each of our water resource recovery facilities, we have worked closely with the Department of with DNR, but also with the Wildlife Federation, so that we can build bird boxes. So here you see an example in our wetlands area that are close, that's here on our Malden Road Innovation Campus. We're putting up wood duck boxes, and this allows for the natural habitat to continue to thrive and to find a place as we're seeing growth happening in our community. So we've tried to make sure that each of our water resource recovery facilities has the opportunity to encourage and enhance the wildlife that is often finding refuge here on site because of the growth that we have in our area, but also so we have that just natural opportunity to encourage habitat in many ways. Again, recycling those resources that are a necessity, oftentimes removing trees, having construction at our within the water business, and recycling those on site to send not only to share the message of how we're encouraging wildlife and restoration of our wetlands, but also as an educational opportunity. So thinking forward into our next slide, as we look into our future on the water, in our water industry, one of our biggest challenges is workforce. And I know workforce is also a focus area of Sustain SC. So how do we think about encouraging the next generation of water professionals? So this is a little different way of thinking about circularity. So as we know that one day we will retire or we will move on, and we'll need other people to become those passionate water professionals to find those opportunities. We work closely in our community so that we can take those of us that have been in the industry and encourage others to join our industry. Here's an example of a relationship that we have with Conisty Nature Preserve, which is right next door to our campus. Conisty Nature Preserve is a beautiful natural habitat that, like I said, is right next to our Malden Rip campus. And they have wonderful educational opportunities that talks about and encourages people to be out in nature. We work closely with them to provide education about water. Here you'll see an example of a playscape, and you can see in the background where they have taken trees that were on site at Conisty Nature Preserve right after Hurricane Helene. They recycled many of those trees and have built this beautiful playscape that's a nature playscape for young people. We partnered with Conisty to build and to support the building of this stream, the river that runs through the playscape, so that children have a chance to play in the stream, to build rock dams, to walk on a log if they don't have that opportunity where they live. Like, say, for example, they may live in an area that's in a condo or in an apartment complex and don't have the chance to be out in nature like others may have had that opportunity. So we use this as a way of bringing new people into our industry, of educating others about water so they could be passionate, and utilizing not only the resources that we have, the trees, the water, our experience to share that message, but also encourage people to take our place in the future. So yet another circularity, right? We never want to think about replacing ourselves, but we need to think about that, especially bringing people into our industry. So we have partnered with Conisty Nature Preserve and also with Roper Mountain Science Center to afford these educational opportunities about water. The other thing I'd like to add is because of Conisty's proximity to renewable water resources to our campus, we have added additional trails, and we have a trail that goes through our campus, our innovation campus, that allows people to connect to Conisty Nature Preserve, to the Swamp Rabbit Trail. Again, allowing for an education through the water treatment process and wastewater recovery process, so that the public can be engaged, so that they can engage in exercise, so they can see our four-legged employees that we have in our sheep and just have that full water experience. So as we think about in our next slide, I like to share another thing that renewable water resources has really embraced is how do we think about our circular water economy? Now, as I mentioned, we remove as many nutrients as we can in the water that is brought to us from residents and from businesses, and now I want to talk a little bit about industry. In the past, when we think about industry, and oftentimes they have wastewater that could be a little difficult to treat or challenging. Our past thinking used to be, well, I got to regulate them. I've got to keep all the bad stuff. All industry wastewater is bad. We just need to manage that. That might have been an older mindset. Well, today, by thinking about how do we look for every resource, and that means not just resources that come to us at our water resource recovery facilities, but resources that exist with our industrial customers. So Renewable Water Resources is working closely with our industrial customers in a new concept called, or not new, but a concept called industrial symbiosis. How can we work together to look at what waste that may be considered waste from those industries and find different ways of reusing those in the environment? They may not even come into our waste stream, but how can we help them think differently about the waste byproducts that come from their processes, and how do we help them with the discharge, with what they send to us at our water resource recovery facilities? In doing so, we found opportunities of enhancing our treatment processes. So, for example, we have one of our industries that's in the area that produce fruit juice. And in the past, they would have to find a way of taking some of that wasted fruit juice that was not used in the products that they make and disposing of it. It was a costly disposal cost. It was a costly expense for them. And we realized, we could use that fruit juice in our treatment process to enhance our recovery of phosphorus from wastewater. So we have partnered with two industries that bring their fruit juices to us here at our Malden Road campus. We take that waste material and we ferment it. We like to call it the Rewa wine, because if you walk by the container which holds this fruit juice, we allow it to ferment, and it smells like a winery. It's pretty neat. And then we take that product and feed it into our treatment process, and it allows us to uptake phosphorus in a more efficient manner. That allows us not to use chemicals to support this aspect of treatment, but it also allows for the beneficial reuse of that waste product. So what we're trying to do is train ourselves to look at new industry coming to our area, existing industry that may be changing their product line, and find ways that we can help them with their waste material, whether it's bringing it to us in a different way, finding it in other ways to share and to use. And that's been a shift for us here at REWA. But again, it takes changing your thinking about it, being not just being the regulator, but now how do we enable and collaborate? Again, thinking about Sustain SC's values. How do we collaborate with our industries and support their needs as they're moving and supporting our community? In the next slide, we have examples of where we've tried to, again, recover as many resources on site. For example, as I mentioned, we send our 44 million gallons of water back to our rivers and streams. We see that as a need for circularity, but we also realize we need potable water at times at our own recovery facilities. So here you see our purple pipes, which purple pipes is an indication of water reuse, where we are taking water that we clean in our treatment processes and using it again to support the recovery of resources and treatment. And so we're circling and recycling that water here on site. You also see in a picture here of some water hoses attached with our purple REWA sign. We have partnered with Trees Upstate, and Trees Upstate has a mission of providing trees and having more trees in the upstate area. And so they actually coexist on our campus. We're recycling parts of our campus that we don't use anymore and allowing for opportunities with nonprofits and other businesses that need a space. So, for example, we've recycled one of our old laboratories. Instead of tearing that laboratory down, we've allowed for DES to have local offices in a laboratory space on site. The other thing that we've allowed with Trees Upstate and other other nonprofits that work with us, Friends of the Reedy, for example. Trees Upstate uses our recycled water to water the trees that are used again in the upstate. So we try to find those collaborative, beneficially supporting activities within our local industry. And then lastly, the picture you see on the left has been our vision for our innovation campus. We are trying to take our campus and not only have it as a resource recovery facility, but a place that the community can come and spend time and enjoy. This affords for green space, as I mentioned, with our trails and the community to learn more about how we recover water, how they are an active part of that. You know, everyone lives in a watershed, and so how we can encourage environmental and water protection, and then reuse some of our facilities. So in this picture, you see how we've reused one of our initial treatment structures that we had for our operations at Malden Road back in 1926, and we've turned that into an education facility, but also an office facility. But again, just rethinking how can we, in the water space, use all these valuable resources that we have. And then my next slide, again, I think as we think about our water future, how do we continue to think about how water is being used? And I use this slide because it's kind of one of those, let's think about the future and what's going to happen next. How can we bring circularity into everything that we do in all aspects of that water cycle? But again, going back to how can we be responsible and how that water is being used. And so today we find ourselves not only with needs for water, but also energy as we support AI. We're not going to get away from information. I mean, we're just, this is a part of us, just like how we see growth happening throughout the state of South Carolina. It's happening. So how do we ensure that we're using the best use of our resources to support this growing and changing need? And so from the water sector, it's how do we use water, whether that's fresh potable water that's supporting the need for data centers, or is that using reuse water that comes from a water resource recovery facility? As I think about this as a leader for REWA, it's how much can we take away from the water that we naturally cycle back into the rivers and streams and set aside perhaps to support a data center. So we're, again, trying to figure out what is that balance for the future? How do we get better at using our water? Because we know certainly it's finite. And we're just recycling that water forever and ever. We have been recycling it from day one. So it's just a natural part of the process. Again, think about the water cycle that we started earlier with. So with that, I'd like to close. My last slide is, again, just to thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about water circularity and how REWA thinks about water circularity. But just to remind you, you know, as we think about nature, everything truly is in a cycle. Nature never wastes anything. They reuse everything. And then as we think about our responsibility, how can we make that responsibility truly focus on renewal? And as we turn that next turn for the future, how are we being responsible in that circular economy? So again, thank you for the opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. We really appreciate this presentation. It was incredible. I know I learned a lot today. We want to open it up to Q&A. So this is your opportunity to drop your questions in the chat. Brent will be monitoring the chat to make sure that your questions get asked. But just to kick off the conversation, I'd love to go back to when we were talking a little bit about, you know, you had mentioned like the drought conditions that we are in right now. And I wanted to ask, how do you balance water reuse with maintaining ecological flow in rivers, especially during these drought periods?
That's a great question, because it is a tough question. I mean, the excitement of being able to find reuse opportunities, you know, there's that balance of I want to do that, but I also understand how much people depend on us restoring those flows to the rivers and streams. So So what we may do is look at sections of our system where we aren't 90% of the flow. I use the Reedy River because it is our biggest urban river. But like, for example, in the Erie River, we may not have as much of a contribution in that Erie basin. So maybe there's an opportunity for reuse from that basin. Again, it's understanding the whole water balance of the state water plan. It's digging in and understanding how do we need to make sure we're providing enough water back to support the downstream needs. So for us, it's looking at where we may not be as much of a contributor to that stream. I think those basins may offer that opportunity. But again, it's locating those needs for reuse in those basins in which we could afford to support that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Brent, I think, did a question come into the chat?
There's some curiosity around how RERAW is managing PFAS and other emerging chemicals of concern that impact reuse of biosolids and wastewater.
No, that's a great question. So from the beginning of the discussions on PFAS, of it being something that may be regulated, and we had the same interest back with endocrine disrupting compounds. I mean, I'm going to date myself a little bit in talking about that. But one of the things we do know is that for wastewater treatment facilities, we aren't designed to remove PFAS, and we often, we know that it can come from commercial customers, from residential customers, from industrial customers. So one of the things that we did from the beginning was to begin monitoring what is coming into each of our resource recovery facilities, monitor what's in our biosolids, monitor what is upstream of our discharge areas where we return water back to the rivers and stream, and then what is downstream. So we have done a lot of monitoring in that to just understand what is the magnitude of PFAS. Coupled with that, as we initiated that, and that was even before we had certified methods, we were trying to find the best methodology to understand what the quantities of PFAS could look like. We started working closely with our commercial and our industrial customers, and we were monitoring their waste streams as well and letting them know they need to reduce their levels of PFAS. I will say that as we initiated this several years ago, we have seen those quantities come down. We have monitored the PFAS in our biosolids. We've educated all of our farmers on what this means. Every year we have a dinner with our farmers, and for the past 5 or 6 years, we've talked about PFAS being in biosolids, what it means. The farmers continue to tell us they trust our product better than fertilizer because at least they know what's in that product. So one other thing that we've done relative to our biosolids is look at what other states are doing for acceptable PFAS levels in biosolids. For example, in the state of Michigan, what are they doing? What's happening in Virginia? And we're comparing that to the levels we see in our biosolids from REWA. So our goal is to reduce that concentration as much as possible, to monitor so that we have a knowledge of how much is coming into our resource recovery facilities, how much is in the biosolids, and then supporting any testing and research that's done on how do you set proper limits for PFAS.
Amazing. Thank you. I do think that there a couple of more questions have come into the chat and into the Q&A. Brent, if you wanted to take a look at those.
Yeah, I think this next one is a continuation of that same discussion, though. It's my understanding that there are quite a few chemicals added during the treatment process to aid in flocculation and settling, such as aluminum and ferric. How is REWA working to lower the after effects of these chemicals since they contribute to toxicity?
So that's a great question. So we strive to treat and to settle our water as much as we can with biology and with mechanical means. So by that, we do not use ferric unless we have a very high level of phosphorus that may come in, or we might have an upset in the treatment process. We may use some ferric to make sure we meet our permit limits. But as I mentioned, our Rewa wine helps us use that product to actually enable better uptake of phosphorus. So it's only on rare occasions that we have to use that type of chemical. There may be occasion that we have to use alum or a polymer. Again, oftentimes this happens after a storm event where we've had a lot of water that comes into the treatment process, because we treat all the water that comes through. Sometimes from the storm events, storm water will come into our treatment facilities. And so we're not heavily dependent on those chemicals. They're really only used in more emergency situations. And so we strive to be chemical free and to build our processes that are truly supported by biology.
Amazing. I think we have time for one more question from the chat.
Has REWA explored any options for activated wetlands to help buffer between their treatment plants and watersheds?
We haven't officially done that. We do have an opportunity with Conisty Nature Preserve being adjacent to us. The Reedy River and the Brushy Creek River runs through Conisty as it flows downstream. And so we've often thought about what additional support is happening with those wetlands as the water travels down and through parts of those wetlands, making its way down through Conisty. So that's been one area. We're also exploring, is there a possibility to do that further in our watersheds up near Travelers Rest in the Marietta area? But we've not taken that on as a project, but we realize that there's an opportunity there to utilize wetlands and to support wetlands in a positive way for, again, ensuring better water quality as that water travels downstream.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for addressing those questions. We've had a lot of really great engagement today. I know that we haven't been able to get to everyone's questions. So please feel free to forward those on to us, and we will make sure to get them to Rebecca as well so that everyone can have their questions answered after today's event. But I'm just going to jump into our wrap up here. We really appreciate your attendance with today's event, and we want to encourage you to attend more Sustain SC events. Please go ahead and take a look at our events here, and on our events page, you can learn more about these different events. Specifically, I wanted to call out our upcoming supply chain series, which is open to all, not just members of Sustain SC, and creates a great opportunity to get to know Sustain SC and build foundational knowledge that's important for sustainability reporting. As you're looking at those things, we also want to encourage you to stay connected with Sustain SC through our different social networks. You can see all of our different social media handles here, and we encourage you to follow along to stay connected. And last but not least, we very much value your feedback and hope that you will share with us your input on today's event. I just dropped a survey in the chat that we encourage you to take to let us know what you thought of today's event, and also to let us know what you would love to see from future technical assistance webinars at Sustain SC. Thank you for your time today, and thank you, Rebecca, for being here with us, and we hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.